Jasmine never thought a single evening shift would shake her world. She had served drinks in grand mansions before, homes where marble floors cost more than her monthly rent. But this one, the Blackwell estate, felt different the moment she stepped in. Maybe it was the weight of old money, or the silence in the hallway that followed her like a shadow. But nothing could have prepared her for what she found behind one private corridor. A golden frame. A photograph. Her breath caught mid-air. The tray of champagne flutes in her hands trembled, the glass threatening to shatter with the pulse of her racing heart. "Oh my God, that's me." The words left her lips as a whisper, barely real, as she stared at the image of a small girl with curly hair, dressed in a pale pink frock. That was her, 4 years old, shy smile, wild hair, and eyes filled with innocence. She hadn't seen that photo in 2 decades. Her knees weakened, the kind of weakness that comes from memories that hit too hard, too fast. But how could this picture be here, inside the private wing of Richard Blackwell's mansion, one of Chicago's most powerful, wealthiest men? Jasmine Mitchell, now 24, had no memories of family. Raised in foster care, shuffled from home to home, she had only vague stories from overworked social workers. Something about a fire, lost documents, a tragedy they never fully explained. But now, standing in the middle of wealth and marble, staring at her own childhood frozen in time, a horrifying possibility took root. Was Richard Blackwell her father? Just half an hour ago, he had walked past her like she didn't exist. Now she couldn't stop staring at his face from across the banquet hall. Him, smiling for the crowd, dressed like royalty, giving a speech about helping children without families. The irony made her stomach twist. He spoke with passion, his voice low and thoughtful. Life doesn't always go the way we hope. Losing a daughter, it changes a man. Losing or discarding. The guests clapped politely. Jasmine didn't. She watched him like someone watching a stranger who had once stolen something from them, something too sacred to be forgiven. And then something clicked, a flicker in his voice, a pause too long, a shadow behind his perfectly rehearsed words. She recognized that kind of guilt because she had lived with its scars all her life. She wasn't sure what was stronger at that moment, her confusion, her heartbreak, or the slow burning rage forming in her chest. As applause filled the hall and Richard Blackwell smiled for cameras and donors, Jasmine made a silent vow she would find the truth. All of it, and when she did, she would make sure the man who had built an empire on lies paid the price for every tear she cried, growing up without a name. 3 days later, the photo still haunted her. Every time Jasmine closed her eyes, she saw that 4-year-old girl again, herself trapped in a memory someone else now owned. But this time, she wasn't just a forgotten child, she was a woman searching for answers. Richard Blackwell wasn't just powerful, he was untouchable. CEO of a global company, donor to orphanages, smiling face of elite charity campaigns. The world adored him. Jasmine knew better. That's when she remembered someone who knew the secrets of this elite world better than anyone. Marcus, the old bartender who had worked every high society event in Chicago for the last 30 years. She found him polishing glasses in the back room of a quiet hotel event. Jasmine leaned in carefully. "Do you know anything about Richard Blackwell?" Marcus froze mid-motion. Slowly, he turned toward her. "Why are you asking about that man?" She gave a shrug, masking the storm in her heart. "Just curious. He seemed complicated." Marcus's voice dropped low. There were whispers, long ago, about a daughter who vanished and a wife who died in an accident. Jasmine's chest tightened. "She was 4, Marcus continued. "The wife, Helena, died in a car crash. Official story. But some folks said it didn't sit right. 2 weeks later, Blackwell inherited a fortune, and the daughter gone. No funeral, no trace, like she vanished into thin air. 4 years old, the same age she was in the photo, Jasmine felt the world tilting beneath her feet. Marcus noticed her reaction and softened his voice. He donates to orphanages now, you know. Public image and all. But some say that's just to ease his conscience. That night, Jasmine couldn't sleep. Fueled by a storm of questions, she created fake profiles and began digging into Richard Blackwell's past. Social media, news archives, old magazines, anything that could connect the dots. What she uncovered left her numb. Richard had remarried 3 times after Helena's death, each time to women half his age. Each time, short-lived marriages ending in quiet divorces, protected by ironclad prenups. But that wasn't all. She found records of Helena Blackwell, her real mother, once a fiery activist. She had been leading investigations into illegal adoption agencies. 2 weeks before her mysterious death, Helena had uncovered something dark. And 2 weeks later, she was dead. Richard became a millionaire overnight. The child disappeared. She disappeared. Now Jasmine could no longer deny what her gut had been screaming. This wasn't a story of tragedy. It was betrayal. She printed every article, every photo, every document she found, created a timeline, a pattern, a case, but she needed help. That's when she remembered Margaret Santos, a retired private investigator who always ordered the same black coffee and sat by the window in the cafe where Jasmine worked morning shifts. Jasmine didn't have all the answers yet, but she had a name. She had a face, and now, for the first time in her life, she had a reason to fight. "Margaret, I need a favor," Jasmine said, gently placing the steaming cappuccino, the one Margaret always ordered, on the cafe table. Margaret glanced up, noting the tremble in Jasmine's voice. "From the sound of it, I'm guessing it's not something small." Jasmine took a deep breath. "I need information on someone important." Margaret, now 65 with decades of experience and intuition, studied her intently. She had seen this look before, desperation wrapped in grief. "How much can you pay?" "I can work for you, clean, organize, run errands, whatever you need." Margaret raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Interesting. It's been a while since I had a real case." She slid her notebook closer. "Tell me everything." And Jasmine did, her voice steady despite the storm behind her eyes. When she finished, Margaret sat in silence, then slowly nodded. "Sweetheart, you're not just looking for your father, you're hunting a predator who may have murdered your mother." The days that followed were relentless. Margaret started, digging, chasing old records, pulling files, and uncovering truths that even she struggled to believe. Richard Blackwell hadn't just abandoned Jasmine as a child. He had declared her dead in the same accident that had supposedly taken Helena's life. "Look at this," Margaret said, spreading papers on her desk. "A forged death certificate, no body recovered. And here, life insurance documents. He claimed $500,000 on your death." Jasmine's stomach turned. "He made money from pretending I was dead." Margaret nodded grimly. "And that was just the beginning. He built his entire philanthropic empire off that tragedy. The Richard Blackwell Foundation, the one he created to honor his loss, was funded by the lies of your death." But then, Margaret found something darker. Helena had hired a private investigator just 2 weeks before the crash. She believed Richard was involved in illegal child adoptions. The investigator disappeared shortly after she did. Jasmine felt her breath catch. He didn't just eliminate problems, he turned their disappearance into profit and praise. Then, Margaret handed her a grainy hospital photo. "She didn't die in the crash," she said softly. "Helena survived for 2 hours, long enough to tell a nurse, 'Protect the girl from the monster.'" Jasmine's vision blurred with tears. Her mother had died fighting for her, died knowing she was in danger, but that would be Richard's fatal mistake. He believed his secrets were buried. He believed Jasmine died with Helena. He was wrong. Now the girl he left for dead was coming back, with every piece of evidence and every drop of fury she had carried for 20 years. The gala was the perfect setting, elegant, hypocritical, celebrating orphans in front of rich benefactors. Richard Blackwell stood center stage, smiling beneath the crystal chandeliers. As a father who lost his daughter, I know the ache these children feel. That's why our foundation, he didn't see her at first. Jasmine, dressed in a server's uniform, moved quietly among the crowd, her eyes fixed on him. But the moment came. She stepped onto the stage and calmly took the microphone. "Mr. Blackwell, may I ask a question?" The room froze. Richard turned, startled and annoyed. "Miss, this isn't appropriate. Shouldn't you be serving drinks?" "I am," Jasmine replied, her voice calm. "But as the daughter of orphans, your speech moved me, especially the part about losing a daughter." She walked closer. The tension snapped through the air like a whip. "Tell us, Mr. Blackwell, how exactly did you lose her?" Richard chuckled nervously. "It was a painful chapter. I'd rather not relive it." "That's unfortunate," Jasmine said, lifting the mic, "because I have details." Richard stared at her now, really looked. Something in her eyes, her voice, a shadow of someone he once knew. She leaned in. First, she didn't die in an accident. Second, her mother was poisoned, not killed in a crash. And third, Jasmine took a breath. "She's standing right in front of you." Gasps echoed through the audience. Richard staggered. "You can't be Jasmine Helena Blackwell," she finished for him. "The daughter you declared dead, the girl whose life insurance paid for this very event." The crowd murmured. In shock, Richard tried to take back control, stepping forward. Jasmine stepped away and lifted a thick envelope. "Here are the forged death certificates, the insurance claims, the autopsy report stating Helena was poisoned after the crash." And then on the screen behind her, an image appeared, a childhood photo. In Richard's private office, the inscription visible, "To the most amazing dad in the world. I love you, Jasmine." The crowd was silent, frozen in disbelief. "For 20 years, she said, turning to him, her voice cracking, "I thought I was unwanted, dead, forgotten, while you..." Her hand trembled. "You used our pain to build your empire." Richard stuttered. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly." Jasmine looked him dead in the eye. "You buried us, but you forgot something." She paused. "Some ghosts come back to haunt you." And as Richard stood trembling before the audience that once adored him, Jasmine smiled. This wasn't revenge. This was justice. The true measure of Jasmine's success wasn't in the headlines or the shiny awards that now lined the once empty shelves of her office. It wasn't even in the grand orphanages being built across the country or the countless interviews she gave to the press. No, Jasmine's true reward came quietly, wrapped in envelopes, handwritten in shaky penmanship or typed in block letters from hands trembling with hope. There were 847 letters, each one from a child, a teenager or an adult who had once been lost in the same system that tried to erase her. Letters that spoke of hope rekindled, futures rewritten, and gratitude that words could barely contain. Letters that reminded her of who she was before the world turned cold. She kept them in a locked drawer, reopening them on difficult days, when the weight of it all felt too heavy. Margaret called them her fireplace, the flame that kept Jasmine's soul from freezing over completely. One of them had simply read, "Because of you, I believe in second chances." That sentence lived in Jasmine's heart like a heartbeat, not because it made her feel powerful, but because it reminded her she had survived. Sometimes at night, Jasmine would sit alone in her office, the city lights blinking like forgotten stars beyond the windows, and think about Helena. Her mother, the woman who had tried to protect her, to fight against a storm she didn't survive. Jasmine imagined what she might say if Helena were alive now, if she could see what her daughter had become. Would she be proud? Would she cry? One night, Sarah brought in a box labeled, "For Jasmine, one day." It had been hidden deep in Helena's things. Inside were letters Helena had written in secret, never mailed, because she hadn't known where Jasmine was. One letter stood out, its paper yellowed and delicate. "My dearest Jasmine, if this ever reaches you, know that you were never forgotten. Not for 1 second. They tried to silence me, but I fought for you with every breath. Wherever you are, whoever you've become, live loud, live true, and never let them steal your light." Jasmine sobbed holding that letter, her tears soaking into the words of a mother who had spoken to her from beyond the grave. That night, she slept with the letter beside her pillow. Meanwhile, Richard's world continued to decay, piece by agonizing piece. Prison had stripped him of every illusion, of control. Gone were the tailored suits, the lavish dinners, the fawning admiration of society's elite. What remained was a hollow man, aging rapidly in a concrete cell, haunted by the face of a daughter he had tried to bury along with his crimes. The walls whispered his failures back to him every night. The guards barely looked at him. Even his fellow inmates treated him with disdain. Murderers had a hierarchy too, and Richard sat at the very bottom. He wrote letters, dozens of them, some angry, some pleading, some dripping with guilt, all unanswered. Jasmine never opened another. Margaret read them, screening them before Jasmine ever saw the envelopes. In one, Richard had written, "I've lost everything. I see that now. You were the best part of my life, and I destroyed you. I don't ask for redemption, only a chance to be remembered as more than the monster I became." Margaret burned that letter. Some wounds, she believed, didn't deserve a bandage. But for all the pain, Jasmine wasn't fueled by hatred anymore. Her vengeance had long been served. Now she worked for peace, real, lasting change. Each month, Jasmine receives letters, small windows into lives she's helped change. One was from 16-year-old Amanda. "Jasmine, I got a scholarship to study medicine at Harvard. Thank you for teaching me that our past doesn't define us." Another from a 14-year-old boy. "You inspired me to become a lawyer. I want to fight for kids like you once fought for your mother." And then there was a note from a mother. "Thanks to the foundation, our family is whole again. After 8 painful years, my children are finally home." In a CNN interview, 6 months after Richard Blackwell's arrest, Anderson Cooper leaned in, asking Jasmine, "Do you feel anger toward your biological father?" She took a moment. Then, with quiet strength, she replied, "Anger is a luxury I can't afford. Richard taught me unknowingly the greatest lesson of my life, that our beginnings don't dictate our endings. He tried to erase me from history, but instead gave me a blank page, and I wrote a story no one will forget." The segment cut to stunning visuals. The foundation in full motion, 5 modern orphanages glowing with life and laughter, 200 children receiving world-class education, 89 families reunited, 156 students now in college on full scholarships, all funded by the fortune Richard had hoarded for himself, now redirected to the very people he once ignored. Jasmine's voice carried over the images. "The difference between us is simple. He used tragedy to build an empire of lies. I used that same tragedy to build a legacy of truth. He took, I gave. The final scene was raw, quiet, and beautiful." Jasmine stood at her mother's grave for the first time, the cold plaque replaced by a headstone of soft pink marble. It now read, "Helena Blackwell Mother, activist, heroine. She fought for those without a voice." Her daughter finished the fight. Jasmine gently laid a bouquet of white roses and whispered, "We did it, Mom. The justice you waited for, it's here. And you know the best part? It came through the daughter he tried to erase. But you raised me to be unbreakable." As she turned to leave, her phone buzzed. A notification. The foundation had just shattered another record. More donations raised in 1 week than Richard had given in his entire public life as a philanthropist. That night, alone in her sleek new Chicago apartment with a panoramic skyline view, Jasmine stood by the window. The same city that once looked down on her now saw her as a force for change. She sipped tea slowly, reflecting. Once an invisible waitress serving champagne to people who wouldn't remember her name. Now, the voice of thousands of abandoned children. Her phone rang. It was Sarah, her aunt, who still called every night. "How was your day, dear?" "Transformative." Jasmine smiled. 50 more children were adopted today. "And you?" "I just finished organizing Helena's journals," Sarah said. "We're publishing a book in her honor." Jasmine closed her eyes. Even in death, her mother was still saving lives, and in that moment Jasmine realized the best revenge was never destroying Richard. Although that part, she admitted, had been deeply satisfying. No, the real revenge was becoming everything he claimed to be, but never was. 1,000 times over. While he rotted in a prison cell, surrounded by silence and steel, the world watched. His daughter built a legacy that mattered. Richard had tried to erase her, but instead, she rewrote the story entirely. She didn't just survive. She turned every scar into a torch, lighting the path for others still stuck in the dark. Every tear became purpose, every rejection a reason to rise. Now, while Richard wakes to clanging bars and sleeps on cold concrete, Jasmine rises in Egyptian silk, knowing she's living the life her mother once dreamed about. That is the kind of justice no court can deliver, a justice no prison door can lock away, a justice that echoes louder than any lie. If this story moved your heart, if it reminded you that from the ashes of betrayal, something powerful can rise, subscribe to the channel, because sometimes the endings we least expect are the ones we need the most. True victory isn't just surviving the storm, it's becoming the lightning that guides others through it.